Yo, what's up? We're about to get going on recording this podcast. I'm super excited. Those that are watching online, you're getting this behind the scene type thing. And so I'm about to hit record and we're about to go. Y'all ready? I'm ready. All right. Sounds good. Yo, what's up? It's Samson here for the very first episode of our podcast, Changing the Story. Are you ready to be a story changer? I like that. I might keep that. Are you ready to be a story changer? All right, we're in the house with the story changers. No, but for real, this is an awesome podcast to be able to help couples, help single people, whatever the case may be, is to help navigate anxiety in the midst of relationships. And so this is all built off the book, Changing the Story. And it is a book that has just recently been published, self-published. You can get it at my website, www.samsonsembeba.com. Check that out. But this podcast is mainly going to be me bringing on guests and different people who have inspired this book journey and people who currently inspire me as well that I just find and I just want to bring on. It's going to be a one-time podcast, one season. I don't think we're going to do much with it, but we'll see what happens. We'll just leave it in God's hands and see what God ends up doing with it. But for the most part, this episode today is going to be more, say, getting a glimpse of the background, getting context to the development of the book and why I landed with this. Did I expect to do this? Have I always anticipated on doing this? And no, this long story short. Anyways, so I'm going to talk about various parts. I'm going to be also recording this video wise. And so as if you want to watch it on YouTube, you could always do that as well. I think it'll be up on YouTube. It'll be somewhere that you'll be able to catch it. Anyways, so super excited. This is just a little bit of a snippet. Next podcast, I'm going to be inviting my wife. So stay tuned for that podcast. If you're interested in hearing some of her thoughts on this whole journey, she's going to be jumping on that podcast to share a story. But I don't know if we're going to record it because we only have one camera. We're going to record it audio-wise, but I don't know if we're going to get the video portion. So if you're watching online, you're going to have to jump on the other thing to catch it on the Spotify or podcast or something. Anyways, so with all that being said, let's jump into the podcast for right now. And as we jump on this podcast, I want to just let you know, we're just going to be going through some what I call turning points. We're going to talk about turning points. And these are just points in my life that I sense or feel like have made an impact on this book and where it is today. And so one of the very first places that I actually want to start is in early childhood relationships. And when I say that, I just mean relationships from ages like, and I don't remember the age, I just remember the grade, but 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, and that whole sphere. One thing that I feel like has, and if you read the book, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you don't know, if you haven't read the book, then this will just kind of be, just flow with it. But in 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, kind of in that time frame, I got into relationships. And it's kind of the earliest form of relationships that I can remember. And it was in these stages that I was beginning to build my framework around relationships and how it feels like, what it seems like, what it's about. And it's, for some people, probably early. For me, it's early. Like, as I'm sitting here, I'm like, yo, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade. Like, bro, you barely understand the basic responsibilities of life. You're still trying to figure out how to clean your room, bro. And you're going to try to figure out a relationship. It doesn't quite make sense. But that's where I was at, and that's what I was doing. And so with these early relationships, one of the things that I had to really navigate, and it's sad that I have to navigate this, and I know people have to figure out even more difficult situations, but for me, this was huge. And that is, what do you do when somebody you're talking to at such an early age begins to find interest in another person, or does something like talking to their ex, kissing their ex, or getting a relationship with their ex, or whatever the case may be, or even talking to somebody else or interested in somebody else, and you're in a relationship with them. In some, I guess, circles, we just call that cheating, right? Like, as you're grown, mature, you're like, yo, he cheated on you. But at such a young age, I had this happen to me, and it was almost like I had to figure out on my own, because my parents I mean, their response to relationships at that age were like, don't have them. Like, it was just like, it was cold, cut, dry, don't have them. And I wish I would have just listened to that advice, because that advice is a lot easier to chew on than trying to navigate, okay, what do you do when somebody essentially cheats on you, or somebody's, begins to become romantically interested in somebody else? And what I took on myself, and this is the birth of the stories I began to tell myself, is, Samson, you're not worth it. Like, you're not worthy. You're not good enough, right? It began to birth these stories. And there's a bunch of other stuff that I could dive into. We're talking strictly on relationships, romantic wise, but there's so many things that began to play a role in all of this, whether I could include how for portions of my life I was bullied, right? I can include that into my life, and how I didn't feel like I fit in those areas and in those situations. But more specifically, just on the relationship wise, it's like, man, I really felt unworthy of just love. And I did a good job at hiding it, I would say, as I grew up, as I went throughout high school. And if anyone would have ever told me junior, senior year in high school that, hey, man, you're going to write a book on relationships, I would be like, yeah, nah. But a book on anxiety, for sure, right? Like, because your boy was facing it, but be vulnerable with that anxiety, nah, because I was hiding it. Like, I didn't want anybody to know that I got anxious in relationships. I didn't want anybody to know that I was battling whether I felt good enough. And maybe for some people it was obvious and they could see it from a mile away. This dude is struggling. But for me, I thought I was hiding it good. It seemed like I was hiding it good. I was hiding it good. I hid it pretty well for myself, because there was even times where I feel like I tricked myself into being like, no, I'm good. Like, it's whatever. Like, yeah, that happened, but it's like, it happened and it's done. You move on. You press forward. And yeah, I feel like it really built the foundation of how I began to view myself, see myself, and how I began to interact with the world. And it all stemmed from these stories. And I wish I could almost go back and just tell myself, like, hey, what you went through is not about you. It's about, like, them. They're going through something. Like, you are worthy of love. You are, I wish I would have been able to be there to just even read some Bible verses to myself and encourage myself and just let myself know, like, listen, bro, like don't let what happened define how you write the rest of your life. I wish I would have been able to have somebody to talk to and to navigate that with. But nonetheless, I got, as I got older, a lot of different things happened. I could dive into all those situations. But I think the next turning point in my life would have to have been conversion. And when I say that, I just mean like my first interaction and encounter with God. And this was back in 2012. And I was a freshman in college. And this was so pivotal because I feel like two things happened almost simultaneously. I can't even say that word. At the same time, two things happened at the same time. I'm just gonna say that. Two things happened at the same time. One, and they're very different from each other. The first thing that happened is I almost had this like big injection of love. Like God injected me with like so much love. He said, Samson, I love you. I care for you. You're my everything. I'm put like laying it all on the line. Like I sent Jesus for you. Like his love just, I felt like I was soaked in it. Like I was swimming in it. And the second thing is, I felt like I needed a wife. And I know that sounds so crazy because it's like, yo, bro, what you talk about? Like, I genuinely felt like I needed a wife. I don't know why. Maybe it's my family. Maybe it's the culture of the Christian church, right? You become a Christian. Now you're like, yo, I need a wife. But I just felt like I needed a wife, and I needed a wife stat. Like I needed a wife soon, ASAP. And like, maybe some of it may be based upon like my parents' love story, because my parents' love story is intense. And just to give you a glimpse of it, and I'm not trying to dive too deep into it, and you may find it strange, weird, whatever the case may be, but this love story is one that, like, to me growing up, it's normal. And that is, my dad had a dream of my mom, me, my sister on a mountain, and God basically saying like, yeah, this is your family. And he had that dream before he even met my mom. Crazy. Like, talk about like, yo, you and you together. Talk about like, yo, the one, right? If you read the book, right? Like, yo, this was it. And so in my mind, I'm like, oh, I'm waiting for God to hit me with mine. And I'm like, yo, you 19, bruh. Slow down. And so this conversion experience, I was just battling with these two realities, right? And I say two realities because one of them makes you feel so full that you could explode, but the other one makes you feel so empty that you don't know if you can continue life without it. And sadly, one began to grow more than the other, right? And that is, I began to desire a relationship, marriage, more at times than I desired God's love. And I even remember the first attempt that I began to, go down the journey. I began to go down a girl I was interested in. I had so much anxiety, and it's because I was completely losing sight of that first thing, which is like that injection of God's love. It's almost like I ran dry on that, and I was just fixated on I had to find somebody. And so yeah, that was that was the conversion. Talk about being converted, introduced into Christianity, and it's all like, yeah, God is everything, and I need a wife. Oh, Lord help us. That was a trip. And as we kind of go into the next like turning point, the next turning point was when I went back to the school that I went to in high school, and it was a boarding academy, Great Lakes Adventist Academy. And at Great Lakes, I went back to work as a task force dean. And as I was working as a task force dean, it gave me the opportunity to just be a mentor to like 80 guys in a dorm. I don't remember how many was there, but like 80 guys in a dorm, right? You got freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors, right? Maybe it was 60. I have no idea. But like, it gave me the opportunity to be a mentor to them. And what's interesting is part of the mentorship was talking about girls. Now, again, if you ask me, high school, too early to be talking about girls. But that's where we were at the time. And just helping guys navigate that space. And I didn't have like the relational juice. Like I didn't have the relationship juice. I just felt like I could just listen, right? And I could offer maybe perspective. But it was interesting having, an anxious background in relationships, but then at the same time handing out advice on relationships. And there was a joy that came from that because like I mentioned earlier, I was really anxious to get married. I felt like maybe I was looking for value in that, or I was looking to find myself to maybe have some worth from that. Maybe I was looking to rewrite the story from the past and say like, no, there are people out there who want me, and I'm like fighting to like try to find them or try to force stuff to happen. But what's interesting is I stayed at that academy maybe 2 years, and I gave advice to guys. They took it. Sometimes it helped. Sometimes it just didn't. I took advice from a lot of people who were at that academy and other people that I ran into and met, and got advice from them about relationships, and it gave me more perspective. And what I began to realize is over the course of those 2 years, I really began to grow in feeling like I understood relationships, but never having really been in one, right? Like I wasn't really in a relationship at any point in time in that season, but I just felt like, man, I'm getting wiser because I'm like getting all these perspectives and all these viewpoints and all these stories, and I'm like, yeah, no, like I feel like this would work, and towards the end, I felt like I was getting good, like I felt like my head was getting really big, and I'm like, yo, like, hey, are you handling this? You know what you're doing. And when I went to university, I carried a lot of that with me, where I was like, yo, you handling this. You handling this. You the guy giving advice. And if you're watching, you went to university with me, or maybe you went to Great Lakes Adventist Academy, I gave you relationship advice. I'm sorry, yo. Like I really try to act like I knew what I was doing, but I was like, nah, bro, you don't know what's going on, bro. You just think you know what's going on. And that's what happened. At college, I felt like people were more intense and intentional about being in a relationship, because it's like, this is my last 4 years to get this right, so people really want to try to find the right person. And so I'd give advice and people would take it. And I don't know how it worked out. I think it worked. It sounded good. That's the scary advice. No one says sounded good. But yeah, my head was just really big. And I say that just because when I got into relationships in college, and this is not like your Facebook status, Instagram photo, like relationship where I'm posting, and I just mean like started talking to somebody, it's almost like every piece of advice that I could give meant nothing. Because I couldn't even navigate it myself. Like I really started to feel myself like staying up at night, struggling, thinking about it, obsessing over it, thinking to myself, if it doesn't work out, I'm probably never going to have anything else. There was times where I distanced myself from God because I felt like, God, like, you set this up and then you let it go. And I was just so much like angst. I don't know if that's the word, but pressure. Maybe that's the better word. There's just so much pressure because I felt like I had to find them. And one of the big turning points is when I started going to counseling. And for the first time, like I really shared with somebody like the uncut version of my life. And I just shared with them everything I was battling with, facing with. We talked about everything, man. Everything. We went in. And for the person to be just looking at me and say like, yeah, no, life happens, man. Like it's cool. And then that taught me how to like share it with friends. How do I share my struggles with friends, the things I go through with friends? And then once I started sharing with friends, it almost like taught me how to like develop authentic, real community where you talk about stuff like this, where you're just honest and you tell the story as it is. You're not trying to fake it. You're not trying to make it sound a certain way. You're not trying to make it go another way. It's like, no, this is just how I remember it and how I'm processing it. And that was so beneficial. Like that was awesome. I entered ministry and I felt like I had good footing on me. I was like, man, I'm navigating some of these, stories that I tell myself, right? Like, and I say that because I say it like that because I wouldn't have used that wording back then, but looking back, I'm like, oh no, you were navigating stories that you were telling yourself, right? So I'm like navigating all these stories, and like my friends and I are like, we're reading all these books, we're on relationships, on marriage, and like I'm thinking about all the stories and advice that I had gotten in the past, and I literally started thinking to myself like, yo, I'm ready for this marriage stuff. This is about to be a breeze. We're about to eat this up. And then I started dating Natalie. And then I was like, yo, I think I'm still dealing with some stuff. Like, I really feel like I'm still battling some stuff. Like, I'm still facing some stuff. Like, I'm seeing glimpses of my anxiety peak back up. I'm like, yo, where is this stuff coming from? Like, I thought I was good. And just when you thought, like, you know, because even in the midst of our dating, like, I was going through counseling and navigating some of these stories and some of the anxiety that I was feeling and facing and trying to recover and trying to grow and trying to develop. And it was getting good. It was getting better. And then we got married. And I say it like that, like, you know, Natalie is a saint. Like, she's amazing. I'm just like, yo, these stories I was telling myself really had me tripping. It really had me tripping. Like, entering marriage, it was like the floodgate just came out, and I just was like realizing like, oh, bro, like the anxiety was so gripping where there are times where I go to work and it would just be like racing through my mind. Moments when I sit down, come home, and the house was just silent because I'm thinking about the conversation from yesterday. I'm thinking about the one from, you know, the week before. And what's crazy is sometimes, like, if we don't pay attention to these stories, one of the stories that we could tell ourselves that could be really damaging to the marriage, to the relationship is, I feel this way because of you. Like, the reason I feel so anxious is because of you. Like, because I only feel this anxious when I'm around you. So you have to be the reason for why I feel this way. And it's like, nah, fam, this is a story you're telling yourself. Because, in all honesty, I felt that way before. Like, I've felt that way, like, so many other times. Like, this is all triggers from stories that I've been telling myself that now I have to face that every day. Like, I have to decide, am I going to continue to believe this? Am I going to continue to believe that I'm unworthy of love? Am I going to continue to believe that I'm unlovable? Am I going to continue to believe that people just want to leave you for something better? Am I just going to like tell myself this? Or am I going to change that story? And I decided to like really start being intentional about all of this. Like, all of this. Like, I really got to flip this script. And I really got to get my relationship with God straight. And I really got to like focus in because I'm missing something. And I started to get into like the words. I get in my Bible, so I get in prayer. I'm like, okay, God, what do you say? Because I'm going off on what I'm saying, but God, what do you say? What are you saying about all of this? And what God says is so much better. So much better. I never really wanted to write a book on marriage or relationships or even anxiety. I'm not like eager to like just talk about this stuff. But I sensed that God was like, hey, you know, like, let's write it. Well, let me take that back, because when I was like dean / at Southwestern Adventist University, I feel like I used to very much be like, you know, I'm gonna write a book because I feel like I'm a beast at this. But when I got married, I was like, nah, I never want to write a book, because I never wanted to write a book because I felt like if I wrote a book, or if I got this out there, then I feel like I would have to be held accountable to that. And I felt like my anxiety was so bad that I'm like, yo, I can't do this. But last year I sensed that God was like, no, like, let's just write this thing. And so I watched it was Brene Brown, which, like, this whole book is based off of, like, one thing that she said on a Netflix special. You can check it out. It's called Call to Courage. If you got 30 minutes or 45, I think, you can check it out. But she just said the phrase, the story we tell ourselves, and how it dictates how we behave, how we react, how we move, and how we operate, and all this different stuff. And so I really like that premise. And so I started to just write some stories that I was telling myself. And I did this over the course, this was last year, early 2023. And I finished it before the summer. And I got a developmental editor, and she edited it. By the way, girl, you did a phenomenal job. Brianna, she phenomenal. And after we went through the first developmental edit, I felt like, God, no, my anxiety kicked up. And I was like, God, this is crazy. I'm feeling it all over again. I'm telling myself stories. This is getting wild. I don't know if I should do it. Like, you're just panicking. And I'm just like panicking, freaking out. And I felt like God was like, no, Samson. Let's take some time and let's just connect. And so I started to go down this journey of this 90-day journey with God. And if you haven't seen it on YouTube, you can go to my YouTube channel and check out the 90-day journey, Samson Simbeba. It's worth it. I'm telling you, because this journey absolutely changed my entire life. Like, I wrote about this in a chapter, and in the chapter, it's the chapter of the story we tell ourselves of I'm alone in this. And I want you, if you haven't read it, read it. If you have already read it, reread it, because that chapter right there is the bread and butter of the whole book. And I wish maybe I would have put that in there, but I'm telling you, as soon as I started to understand that I'm not in my marriage alone, that I have the Holy Spirit, and that the Holy Spirit can help me, my entire perspective on all of this changed. Like, the stories we tell ourselves, everything. Because it was almost like God was, like, it's almost like he just showed up in the marriage. He said, I'm the one that brought this thing together, and I'm the one who's going to hold this thing together. If you look to yourself to hold it together, you're going to experience something. You're going to experience some trouble. But if you're looking for like me, I will hold your marriage together. And I say this to say, relationship-wise, even to myself, like, I don't have to navigate any of this stuff alone. Like, if I find myself going to an anxiety like slope, I just sense the Holy Spirit telling me, you know what, Samson, I think you're telling yourself this story. And that's not actually what I say. And the Bible tells us that. In John chapter 16, it says that he will bring things to our remembrance. And that's what he did. He brought it to my remembrance. What God actually says about that story I'm telling myself. And then it helps me to write a better story about whatever it is I'm going through. I'm telling you, this changed the game. And it was funny because during the 90 days, I was kind of happy because I was like, maybe I'm just going to let this book like rot off in the distance or just become some dry bones in the cupboard. But it was like when this 90 day was over, it's like God was like, all right, now pick up the book and write. And I was like, wait, what? He's like, no, pick up that book and write. I was like, And he's all like, don't forget, I'm going to be with you. And I was like, that's facts. And I really sensed my whole life changed. My whole perspective changed. I gained a level of confidence in writing this book, finishing it, getting it out there. And it's not that like I feel like my life is going to be perfect or like I'm not going to have an anxiety flare up or Natalie and I are going to experience, difficulties down the road. It's just the confidence I have in God to do what God does. Hold this thing together. Like, I have so much confidence. Like even if you're single, it's like, have confidence that God is going to hold you together. Whether you dating, have confidence that God is going to lead you. And if it's going to work out, it's going to work out. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Like, just have confidence because you're not alone in your experience. Fam, I don't have anything else for you. That's literally all I got. That changed my life. And so if you're tuning in, I just want to say thank you so much for tuning in because that's my story. And I can't wait to share more down the road. And so if